Whether you're ordering wings for the game, whipping up a 7-layer dip, or ordering pizza, there's something about football that makes you want to eat. And this football season, Uber Eats has the best deals on game day food. No matter what you're craving, from 2-for-1 pizza to buy one, get one wings, Uber Eats will be dropping new deals each week, all season long. Uber Eats, official on-demand delivery partner of the NFL. Order now. Terms and conditions apply. See app for details.
Hey everybody, it's Weird Islanders, the podcast, back once again. My name is Dan. No Mike tonight. He is at a family function, but I have a great guest and a great subject that I've been wanting to get to talk about for a long, long time. My guest is currently the New York Rangers beat writer for Newsday. In a prior lifetime, he was beat writer for the Islanders, and we're going to get back into that era with him. And he is Colin Stephenson. Colin, how are you?
Oh, I'm doing well. I was I was a little confused when I when I got your email. Like, I don't cover that team anymore, but
Right.
I'm looking forward to it. Like, I had a lot of fun in those days. So,
Fun is something I think a lot of Islanders fans didn't have in those days. So I'm glad you had fun. I guess for a beat writer covering a team that was eventful, to say the least, it would probably be a lot of fun. And so you cover the team in the sort of mid to late 90s, and the Islanders back then are very different than they are now. Unstable would be one way to put it. Ownership was a myth I have here. Winning was kind of a pipe dream back then. Right now, the Islanders are so stable that even when they make changes, people think, oh, they're just the same team over and over again, even though they have like 4 or 5 new players every year. And everybody's like, oh, they're the same team. Well, not really. But, now that you've covered the Rangers for a long time as well, do you think that these two franchises are maybe a lot closer in maybe, personality, or at least the way they are run now, than they were all those years ago? Or do you still see that there's kind of a big gulf in difference between the Islanders and the Rangers?
no, I think there's a big difference. I mean, the Rangers are certainly very corporate with that whole Madison Square Garden properties, or whatever their thing is, and they've got this whole, they got the Knicks too, and the building, and they've got like just this whole level of administration and organization, and all these executives that you're not sure what they do. And it all starts, the owners at the top, and then there's all these executives that you have to go through, and it's just super corporate, and they do stuff that you just can't understand. Whereas with the Islanders, it's just Lou. Like, I don't care who owns the teams. It's Lou. It's Lou's shop. He runs it, and he's the guy, and he'll be happy to explain to you why he does things the way he does things, even if you disagree with it. So, but at least he's just there, and it's easier to understand. But which is not to say that one's setup is better or worse than the other, but they're just different. I mean, I think you talk about stability, and the team hasn't changed much. I mean, I think that's if anything, I do see some similarities between Lou and Chris Drury, the Rangers general manager, in a couple things. I mean, obviously the Rangers are stable, and they built this thing. They went into a rebuild, and they came out of the rebuild, and now they're kind of maintaining, and they've kept their roster together from last season to this. But also just in terms of the secretiveness of the general managers, and the way that they both hold things close to their vest. I do see a little bit of Lou in Chris Drury. So, I mean, as far as that's concerned, I think there's some similarities, but generally speaking, no, I think they're quite different.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. I agree with you. Yeah, we always used to hear about Garth Snow, like he's kind of like taking that page from Lou Lamoriello. Back this is when Lou was still with the Devils. Like everybody who's quiet always kind of follows that Lou idea for good reason
Yeah.
because you don't get yourself in trouble that way, right?
Well,
So
I do think that in terms of media and stuff. I mean, I do think there are so many executives involved with the Rangers that there are there are opportunities to find stuff out that maybe Chris Drury wouldn't want you to find out. And I think it's less so with Lou. I mean, I think
yeah,
Lou runs a really really tight ship, and I
yeah.
don't see anybody breaking any stories over
Yeah, yeah, that's true too. Which is great when you run an Islanders podcast.
there.
Believe me, it's awesome when absolutely nothing comes out.
Nothing comes
So
out.
yeah, exactly. So, somehow we've managed to cobble together 9 seasons under, well, I guess 7 seasons under Lou, despite not ever hearing anything fun from him. But
No,
no, you're right. And then the other thing too is, like you said, the corporate structure, the ownership thing, and the Islanders are always I think going to be perceived as sort of the little brother team.
yeah.
Again, for good reason. And that's always the way it is. But it is funny when I go back and look at these old stories. I'm like, man, this is not the same team that it was back in the mid '90s.
No, yeah. So my tenure with the Islanders, I mean, I jumped on at a really really good time. I jumped on at
Mm,
the All Star break in 1993, and
mm.
of course,
Oh wow,
they had that was the year where they
yeah,
knocked off the Penguins, and
mm,
Dale Hunter hit Turgeon after he
right,
scored the winning goal or whatever, and so there was a lot going on, and they were good at that time. But as you mentioned, the ownership group was a little shady. I mean, and it was actually the four guys were, I think, leasing the team,
mm,
and it caught up to them eventually because
yeah,
at the end of the day, they could only spend so much. I mean, and
right,
there wasn't a salary cap at the time, but
yeah,
one of Jim Smith, that was working for Newsday at the time. I was at the Daily News,
mm,
but he wrote a story that I didn't really get it at the time. Um, and he wrote, I guess he cobbled together what the salaries were and came up with a number for their opening night roster. And it was like whatever the number was, it was like a $15 million payroll,
right,
which at that time was, I mean, I didn't even get it. I didn't get the significance of it, honestly. Like, like, well, who
mm,
cares what they all make, because we were all just still focused on, getting, they got this player and they got that player
right,
and this guy can do this and this guy can do that. And ultimately what the story was, and it was years later when it kind of dawned on me, like, huh, you know, if it's $15 million is their maximum, and then now you can't make a trade to bring on a guy who's making salary without like offloading a guy who's making salary, then you really, it's tough to compete that way.
right,
And ultimately that's what happened. That team started breaking down, and
yeah,
and then, by the time it got to, it got real bad, and I got out of there. I was just like, yeah, man,
yeah.
I can't do this anymore.
Yeah, I don't blame you, but no, that's true. I just remember being like, because later on, it wasn't this time when the salaries became a thing, but I remember when, not so you have this is still the Pickett ownership with the Gang of Four, who owned 10% of the time. Then it was John Spano, obviously. Then it went back to Pickett, and then it went to the Stephen Gluckstern and the Milstein brothers. I remember when they were in charge, they wanted to pare down the payroll to like $10 million or something like that, $10 or $12 million. And I remember thinking at the time, like, wait a minute, doesn't Mario Lemieux make $7 million on his own
Yeah,
or
yeah,
something? So you
yeah,
want to obviously there's no Mario Lemieux on this team, but this one guy's gonna be making half of what the entire roster is gonna
yeah.
be making.
Ultimately, yeah. I mean, and it's but that's kind of business, right? I mean, you see it all the
Mm.
time. Listen, I follow the Premier League in England, and
No.
and so in that league, there's 20 teams in a league, and there's like four or five of them can win,
Right.
right?
Spend all the money. Yeah.
And
Right.
four or five of them are just trying to stay in the league. They want and then there's a vast, there's maybe 10 teams that are just in the middle and just want to make sure, we know we're not going to win, but we don't want to fall
Right.
into that
Mm,
danger zone there.
mm,
So it becomes a business where it's like any other business. Well, you're trying to make a profit, so
right.
you want to make sure you control your expenses, and then make sure that you make more than you spend at the end of the day. So I mean, it shouldn't, as fans, we want to think that the owners of our teams are trying to win. They want
Mm,
to win and win and win. And in a lot of cases, and not just in hockey, but in a lot of professional sports, a lot of times it's less about winning and more about making a profit.
Exactly. If Mike were here, he's a big Everton fan and actually has a soccer
Well, that's
podcast
too bad
himself.
for
So
him.
yeah, exactly. Oh, trust me, I get the text messages like, oh my god, these guys did it again. So I don't know. I mean, following just the Islanders is bad enough. So I don't know how he does
Yeah,
both of them,
yeah.
but
No,
he could explain that to you one
that's
of these
sad.
days.
That's
Yeah,
that's a tough life.
it is. It is. He has chosen it, but because that's the way he is. But speaking of little brother teams, we are here to talk about the Islanders and a little brother in particular. And again, a player I've been
That's a
hoping to
nice
talk
little
about.
segue you got there.
Yeah,
That's good. I like it.
took me all day to come up with that one. And a player that I've been hoping to talk about on this show for a long, long time. So I'm very excited to get to this. So Colin Stephenson, will you please reveal the subject of tonight's episode of Weird Islanders, the podcast?
Subject of tonight's Weird Islanders podcast is a famous little brother in his own right, Brett Lindros.
That's right. Brett Lindros, maybe the poster boy for this era. We got a lot to get to in a very, very short Islanders and NHL career. Before we get to all that, reminder that we are on Patreon at patreon.com/Islanders Anxiety. Membership gets you ad-free episodes, bonus podcasts, written posts, and a whole lot more. Or you can join for free to get announcements and our weekly release calendar. So sign up today at patreon.com/Islanders Anxiety. So Colin, as I said off the top, you've done probably hundreds of podcasts, and this one is going to push the boundaries and limits of your memory further than any of them ever have.
Yeah,
and
sure.
So we're going to start with what I hope is an easy question, or at least a warm-up question. What were your first impressions of Brett Lindros, New York Islander?
Well, he was a good-looking guy.
Yeah,
no,
true.
He was a good-looking guy. He was charming. He was well-spoken. And where his brother Eric, had all that pressure on him and the whole nonsense. I mean, I don't know if people really need to hear the story of Eric Lindros and going number one overall and forcing a trade and all that kind of stuff. But I maybe in later years Eric kind of loosened up a little bit, but in the beginning I think he was very guarded, and the whole thing, the father was their agent and this and that. Brett was loose. Brett was the younger. It's like William and Harry, right? The one guy is the heir to the throne, and the other guy is just like hey, I'm just the second guy. Nobody cares about me. Brett was loose, and he was really friendly, and he smiled a lot, and I actually liked him. He's one of those guys, that when you're around him every day, he's really cool to talk to. So that was the thing that I liked about him. We didn't really know that much about him. I mean, you sent me some links. I wasn't able to get to all of them, but I remember you sent me statistics, and his junior statistics. It's not like he played that many games in junior hockey.
Right.
So what we knew is he was 6'3" and 215 or 220, whatever it was. So he wasn't quite as big as Eric.
Yeah.
But he was big, and he he had scored in junior hockey, and they drafted him in the first round, and maybe it was a reach, but I think for that year's draft, it might have been a reach, and certainly if his last name wasn't Lindros, he might not have been a first round pick even. But given where they were at the time, the Islanders, they were in a place where they needed some sort of buzz and some sort of thing that made people talk about them, because the team was, if you remember that year, they drafted him in 1994, and they had just been annihilated by the Rangers in the first round. And they're clear, and they were they drove Al Arbor into retirement, and clearly the team was not going the right way. It was going to go the wrong way, and you could see that coming, and so they were going to be irrelevant. And so drafting a guy named Lindros was a way at the time to really maybe get some publicity, get some eyeballs on them, and get people talking about them. And so it was like, okay, whatever, if you insist. And then and then when he played, Brett, he fought a lot. He was a 4-line guy, and he fought a lot, and he won some and he lost some, and but if you're a guy, who can, the idea was that he was going to break in as a fighter and then eventually kind of grow and become, become some sort of a power forward. And of course, it never happened.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, he's had this again. It's a very short career. We're only going to talk about 51 games with the
Yeah.
Islanders.
Yeah.
But there's a lot packed in here. And yeah, even pre-draft stuff, I was taken aback by that too. I looking at his junior numbers and you're expecting 100-point seasons or, 40 goal seasons, something like that. But in 72 games in junior, which were all played for Kingston, 39 goals, 40 assists, 79 points. And, he had a bunch of penalty minutes because he did fight a lot, but it just seemed like those were not the numbers of a guy who's eventually going to go number 9 overall. He did play for Team Canada for a while, this sort of traveling team, because he was drafted just before the NHL lockout. Right. So that was really the biggest hockey going on right then and there. But, I was kind of surprised by how low his numbers were. But you're right. He was selected mainly because his name was Lindros. And Eric at this point, we don't need to go into the whole draft thing. I think everybody knows that story by now. But, right off the bat, this guy shows up with the Flyers, scores 41 goals, and, immediately makes an impact. Again, 44 goals the year before, which would have been the year that Brett was drafted. And so immediately this guy is a superstar. And here's his brother. And the Islanders have a chance to take his brother. Now, fun fact, I also did not know about this. The Islanders actually had the 12th overall pick that year and made a trade with the Quebec Nordiques, who apparently were forbidden from having any Lindroses ever. This is a totally different story than the Eric trade, but they made a trade with the Nordiques. The Islanders sent Uwe Krupp, who would eventually score a Stanley Cup winning goal for the Nordiques after they moved to Colorado, and the 12th overall pick to Colorado with Ron Sutter and get the 9th overall pick. And they used that to draft Brett Lindros.
Yeah, not their finest moment, maybe. He was a good kid, and he knew who he was, and they paid him a lot too. Like I think, he didn't for the time, as I recall. I think
right out of the gate, they gave him a big contract.
Yeah, I think it was like $7.5 million over 5 years or something, which in $1994.
Right.
Was a lot of money for a guy, coming out of the draft. But there was the thing is that there was some of that money was for marketing, right? So it's not just how many goals and assists he's going to put up on the season, but what sort of marketing possibilities there were, and the best laid plans, I think he certainly knew he was not Eric Lindros, and we certainly knew he was not Eric Lindros, and the hope was that he could be a serviceable player. But yeah, and in hindsight, 9th overall is pretty high for a guy that would end up playing 50 something games.
Definitely. Now you're 100% right, and to his credit, Brett. We need to establish that Brett definitely did not think that he was going to be Eric Lindros again, who was a superstar right out of the gate. However, when the Islanders drafted Brett Lindros, and we have video of that, it is from RDS, so it is mostly en français, but we can play a little bit.
New York Islanders would like to thank the city of Hartford for the hospitality they've shown us the last 2 days. Thank you. The New York Islanders are pleased to select Ontario Hockey League, the Kingston Frontenacs, Brett Lindros.
Bon, ben c'est exactement ce qu'on nous avait dit. Donc, il y a eu toute cette tractation entre les Islanders et les Nordiques pour faire l'acquisition de Brett Lindros. Alors, finalement, c'est un petit peu ironique, messieurs, que ce soit Québec qui a refilé cette sélection aux Islanders et que ce soit Brett Lindros qui se retrouve
Les Lindros ne pourront pas dire que les Nordiques les aiment pas. Ils ont aidé les Islanders à mettre...
So right after drafting Brett Lindros, Don Maloney makes an infamous proclamation, if you will, that they drafted the better Lindros. This has gone down in the annals of Islanders history, unfortunately, for all the wrong reasons, as you probably just said. I tried to find the sort of original genesis of this quote, but I really couldn't. I just found a lot of sort of retroactive stories about it. As the Islanders beat writer for the Daily News at the time, were you there? Were you present when he made this quote, or do you remember?
I may have been. My memory's faded. You're going to test my memory. I don't know. It was a long time ago. Right. But he wouldn't be the only guy to do that. I don't remember when the Mets signed Kazuo Matsui. I think the Mets said something similar, because Hideki Matsui was playing for the Yankees,
Right.
and the Mets were like, "No, we got Kaz Matsui, we got the better Matsui." So it was, I mean, like people say stuff, and I don't know. I mean, the Islanders, I don't know if this was the case at that time, but their scouting in terms of drafting people, I think, it got to a point where it wasn't real good. I mean, I think they
No,
were just basically picking whoever was at whatever position was that the NHL scouting bureau decided a guy was at. And so they weren't really doing the work to unearth and find diamonds in the rough and stuff. I mean, they were picking the guy that was in that position according to the scouting and NHL scouting bureau. And in this case, they took a flyer on a guy because he had a famous last name, and they thought there were marketing opportunities. And that's really, they were in a position where they needed some sort of buzz and some sort of reason for people to pay attention to them. And they not only did they draft Brett Lindros, but like he didn't go back to junior, he didn't minor league hockey. I mean, like he came right to the Islanders, and I don't know that was the wisest decision for him.
And now a word from our sponsors. First is always vintageicehockey.com, where you can get t-shirts, hoodies, jerseys, and more featuring over 100 classic hockey logos. Vintage Ice Hockey now carries a full line of Islanders Anxiety merch featuring our blue and orange brain logo, as well as our Al Arbor and the Island shirts. And as always, our portion of the sales go directly to the Center for Dementia Research. That is vintageicehockey.com. Try wines from the Pinot Project. They offer a rosé, a Pinot Grigio, and a Pinot Noir that was named a top 100 best buy by Wine Enthusiast magazine. All are delicious, priced at less than $15 a bottle, and available at local wine shops and at UBS Arena. Learn more at thepinotproject.com. Please drink responsibly. This, again, was the NHL lockout at the time.
Yes.
Basically, the back half of 1994 was just wiped out.
Yeah.
So they come back in January of 95, and at this point, Brett had been playing for Team Canada, and he comes to training camp, and he makes the team right out of camp, which was surprising. Again, this is a 19-year-old kid.
Yeah.
6'4", again, 200-something pounds, very much like, you can say this about a lot of athletes, but very, very much sort of like a boy in a man's body almost. Like he's just this hulking guy, but when he starts talking in his face, he seems like a kid. He's a 19-year-old kid, and makes the team right out of camp and is right there for their season opener against the Florida Panthers.
This is Bob Page back in our Sports Desk studios once again. It's opening night for the Islanders out at the Coliseum. Roger Nielsen, John Van Beesbrook, and the Florida Panthers providing the opposition. We'll have highlights of the game, which just got underway throughout the evening here on MSG. Game marks the debut, of course, of Islanders' #1 draft choice, Brett Lindros. The 19-year-old kid brother of Eric Lindros got big money, and big things will be expected of him.
I'm really excited. I've been looking forward to doing this for a number of years now, and finally going to happen, and so it's going to be a lot of fun. My parents are going to come down, and then a couple of days later, my brother plays here, so it's going to be a fun weekend.
He's come in here, and he's been great. I mean, we loved him in training camp, and he's come back. He's got a great attitude. He gives the enthusiasm, and he gives us what a big, strong winger goes to net, and he really compliments. He's playing with Ferraro and Holt. They got a very good line.
I'm 19 years old. I just turned 19, and so I'm basically still a kid. But people expect things right away, and I hope to deliver them. But if not, have patience.
I know this is we're talking about 30 years ago, but like going into this season, it was weird. Like you said, they got decimated by the Rangers in the playoffs. They're looking for anything here. Lorne Henning is now the coach.
Lorne Henning is the coach. Yeah.
Yeah, the nicest guy in the world. Maybe not the best head coach the Islanders have ever had. They still have a lot of the roster, aside from the two goalies. And we've already done our episode on Ron Hextall. So we've already told that story about his performance in that playoff series that got him basically shipped back to Philly. It was not great. But aside from the goalies, this is still more or less the same team. Ferraro, Turgeon, Hogue, all these guys. Of course, Turgeon and Vladimir Malakov will be traded later. But do you have any sort of memories about going into that season? Like what the sort of maybe projections were? I mean, they ended up finishing, I'm pretty sure, dead last, but like, did it seem like a team that was going to finish dead last, or was there maybe like actual hope for that season?
No, I think there was hope. There was definitely hope. I mean, as you said, they had, this was a team that 2 years earlier had knocked off the Penguins, and they had, he had gone to the Eastern Conference, or actually it wasn't the Eastern Conference final. I think it was the Wales Conference final.
It was, yeah.
And ran out of gas, and then because they didn't have Turgeon, if Turgeon hadn't been injured in that Washington series, in the last game of that Washington series, who knows? Because their team was built around Turgeon. But anyway, so they go through the following season, the lockout, the 93-94 season, and the Rangers just ran away with everything and just steamrolled them and everything. And drove Al Arbour into retirement, and Arbour, advocated for Lauren Henning, who was his number one assistant to get the job. So he really kind of left the Islanders no choice as far as, putting pressure on them to hire Lauren Henning. Now, I know that, there were some decisions that Lauren Henning made, I think Zygmunt Palffy was in the picture at that time too.
Yes.
And so there were two young right wings that they had, and one was Palffy and one was Brett Lindros. And I think there was some friction, let's say, between Maloney and Henning about how Henning was using Palffy, because at that point it was clear that Palffy was. It was clear that, I used to joke all the time that Palffy was too good for them, but they couldn't seem to get him, in positions where he could help the team. They couldn't get him the ice time where he would have made a difference, and they couldn't find the right players for him to play with. And I think he was scratched one time, and and I remember we asked Henning about it, and I think Maloney asked me, I think the next day, like, what did Henning say when you asked him that question? It was just kind of a weird vibe. But I think I think the whole thing was messed up. I think that when Al Arbour left, he kind of left them no choice but to hire Henning. I think they kind of did that, but then whoever's idea it was, and I doubt very much that it was Maloney's. It was probably somebody else's. To draft Brett Lindros, that didn't work either. So it was just a weird time. And then eventually they tore it all down. They traded Turgeon and Malakoff. And they just blew the whole thing up.
Yeah. We've also done an episode on Kirk Muller way back in season 1, and
the
wounds are still fresh for that one.
Yeah.
Trust me.
I remember. It's funny. I remember. Because Mueller didn't want to come and the whole mess. And I remember there was one press conference. It might have been the first one where Mueller was there. And I remember looking at Maloney and looking at Kirk Muller and saying, man, these two guys look a lot like each other. And so that would tell me why Maloney liked Kirk Muller so much. And, but whatever. Right. But that's another story which you've already told. But
you had a ringside seat for that.
Yeah.
I also heard that we'll get back to Brett Lindros in a second, but I also heard that so Matthew Schneider was also included in that trade. And
yes,
from what I understand, Schneider came, no problem.
No problem.
Somebody asked him where's Kirk? And he's like, oh, he ain't coming. And that was the start of the whole thing.
It was, I liked Matthew Schneider. He was really, really a cool guy who, just had no airs about him. He had won the cup with Montreal, and he had gone further, I think, probably in his hockey career than he probably could have expected as a guy growing up in in New York, and so I think he understood it. He was getting well paid, and I think he honestly tried to help and tried to be a leader on the team, and but it was a bad situation.
Definitely a bad situation for everybody involved, unfortunately. Yeah, for sure. Okay, so thanks. I appreciate that. I loved Matthew Schneider growing up. He was a favorite of mine. So back to Brett Lindros. So, like you said before, this was a guy who started out as a bit of a fourth line player and fought a lot. And in fact, he had probably 3 fights, I think, if my count is off. I hope it's not off. Did at least 3 fights before he had his first goal. And he even got into a scrum in a game against the Flyers, which is also kind of hilarious when you think about it. They had this whole thing about the brothers playing, and here he is getting into a scrum with his brother on the ice and everything. It wasn't a fight, but it was definitely some tensions there.
Oh, alone in front, waited too long, and Salo dives out and they scramble. And then Lindros is tackled by his brother. And then Renberg on the near side.
Well, I asked Bonnie Lindros, who is in attendance, the mother of the two, you think those two would ever fight? She says, I don't think they will, but they came close to it.
You think she'll send him to bed without supper tonight? Bonnie Lindros is here, the mother of the three. Boy, you know, they're amazingly alike, similar in appearance. Their demeanor is alike. When they talk, they sound alike.
Well, Brett is a lot more outgoing than Eric in his conversation. I think that Brett would like to have some of the skills that Eric has.
But this is a guy who was not afraid. He was willing to go with just about anybody, big or small. He had a preseason fight with Darren Langdon of the Rangers that got pretty bloody.
Yeah, it was a big boy, Darren Langdon.
Yeah.
Here we go, Lindros and Langdon. Oh, wow. And did he get a shot at this? Oh, Langdon came back and dropped the haymaker. Oh, baby. Trying to switch hands. Langdon, he took some. Oh, this kid is tough, isn't he? So is done. Langdon has staying power. He took some shots to start this thing, and then he gave some back. Gotta learn when he throws the uppercuts, though. Remember, those two almost had a scrap on the island. And they met here, and boy, did they go. This kid is 18, and is he tough? And Langdon is tough.
He fought Paul Laws, who fought everybody with the Panthers at the time. He would eventually fight D. Malcock, another weird Islander.
Yeah.
What do you make of that willingness to fight so quickly? It's a different era. Like, we have to, those kinds of fights are done now at this point, thank God. But this guy was not afraid to go in like that. Do you remember thinking, geez, this guy is he's fearless?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think there are guys who, it probably happens less in this day and age, but you see with the Rangers with Matt Rempe coming in,
Right.
And if those of us who see Rempe on a nightly basis we'll tell you that he's a pretty good skater, and he possibly could parlay this fighting thing into being a real player, right? And I think that's always, for a lot of guys, that's the hope, right? I mean, you come in, especially in Lindros's case, 19 years old. He was not going to score 20 goals, in that first 48 game season. So, one of the things that he could do to help the team was to fight and sort of spark them and things like that. So it wasn't something that we at that time really, thought too much of. It was just like, okay, this guy's going to fight, and hopefully, at some point he'll calm down and maybe he'll score a goal or two. Like you look at a guy like Brendan Shanahan, right? Brendan Shanahan, I believe, he was was he a first? No, he was probably a number 2 overall pick by the Devils, came up 18 years old, and he fought all the time too, right? Yeah. I mean, and he scored, I believe, 1 goal his rookie year, but he fought a lot. And obviously he turned into a Hall of Famer, 600 goals and however many penalty minutes and all that kind of stuff. So it was something that guys did at that time and could do at that time. So it wasn't anything that we made too much of a big deal about. We watched like anybody else, a 6'3", 6'4" guy, whatever he was, 200 something. And he was willing to go with the tough guys in the league. And we appreciated that for itself, but there was always the thought that, that he could grow into something more than that. And we'll never know, obviously. I mean, what we didn't know at the time was how many concussions he'd had in junior hockey. And we didn't find that out until after he ended up retiring.
Yeah, and that's exactly the spot we're at now. So on February 9th of 1995, he gets into a fight with Francois Leroux of the Penguins. And at first, it seems like just a regular fight. I mean, again, these fights had a lot more intensity than the fights that we see these days. But this was where Lindros suffered his first NHL concussion.
Yeah.
Far corner for Taylor. Chris Taylor, the 22-year-old, sets up Lindros right at the stop. Brett Lindros trying to jab it away from the goaltender, can't, and then he is challenged and comes up swinging. He and Francois Leroux. This will be Brett's third fight. One the other night in Tampa with Bergevin at the end of the game. One at the end of this game with Leroux, and he is a clear-cut winner in this battle.
And this gets right back to what you were talking about, where like, okay, he's got a concussion. That's obviously bad. He missed about 3 weeks, I think, of time here. But what we didn't know at the time, and what would come out sort of slowly, was that when he was playing in junior, he got a whole bunch of concussions that seemingly nobody knew about. Nobody had diagnosed. Nobody said anything about. Brought it up. So like this story came up while he was hurt and sort of became a story at that point, right?
Yeah. When he ended up retiring, the guy who was the Islanders' concussion guy was Dr. Elliot Pellman, who was the Jets' concussion guy. And his claim to fame was that he was the one who told Al Toon, the Jets receiver, to retire. And I think years later, Pellman was, got into some trouble and ended up, it didn't end well for him. But at the time, he was a big name guy, and and he was the guy that made Al Toon retire at the peak of his career because of concussions. And the thing that Pellman said, and we spoke to Pellman directly in those days, because the Islanders put him out front for us, unlike today, where you don't talk to the medical personnel or whatever. But in those days, we were able to talk to Pellman because he was a celebrity of sorts. And one of the thing that he said is, look, when you start getting concussions from blows that don't seem to be that severe, that's when you know you have a problem, right? And so the concussion that ended it for Brett Lindros, whichever it was, and I don't remember what it was, quite honestly, but what I remember, my impression, the memory that I have, is that it didn't look that bad. Given what we say, it wasn't like he got bludgeoned or anything like that. Maybe he took a shot. I don't even remember what it was. I'm sure it was a fight. But he didn't leave the fight sort of, looking woozy or anything like that. And so, that's always stayed with me. When you have that many concussions and it gets almost easier and easier to get one, you get to the point where, you're getting a concussion from a blow that doesn't seem to be that hard. Then it's probably time to stop. And it came up, and I thought of Brett Lindros a lot this past season covering the Rangers because of Philip Hedl on the Rangers. When Hedl got a concussion in the 10th game of the season, where he just bumped into a guy inadvertently at center ice. He wasn't looking, the other guy wasn't looking, and they just kind of bumped into each other. And the next thing we know, he doesn't come back. And then the next thing we know, he misses the last 72 games of the season with a concussion. That's when I started thinking of Brett Lindros, and then thinking, you know what? Brett Lindros was 21 years old or whatever, however old he was when he retired. And I started thinking about him in relation to Philip Hedl on the Rangers. Now, as it turns out, Hedl came back and played a little bit in the playoffs, and now is back with the Rangers again. And, he's determined to make a go of it. And, he says he's fine and all that kind of stuff. Brett Lindros never did. But, Hedl's probably a better player than Brett Lindros was anyway.
Probably. But yeah, these are issues that are still with NHL players today. And like you said, it's not unusual. When I saw Francois Leroux come up here, the guy I thought of was Pat LaFontaine.
Yeah. Because
Leroux had checked LaFontaine at center ice. LaFontaine's my favorite, all-time favorite player. And this is when Pat was still with Buffalo. And, it was an open ice check. It was a hard check, but it looked like something that probably had happened to LaFontaine 100 times at that point. And he missed the rest of that season, and that started the whole contract dispute with Buffalo. He thought he could play. The Sabres were like, we don't think you can play. He ends up getting traded to the Rangers, plays a half season with them, runs into his own teammate in Mike Keane, and that gets another concussion, and that was it.
Yeah.
And it was just like, man,
I was worried.
This is some bad business.
I was worried about, remember when Sidney Crosby was having concussions?
Yeah.
Early in his career, and I was worried, but, he was able to get through it, and he's still playing, and he's played a long time. And so, thankfully it worked out for him. And, I hope the same for Filipino. I hope he plays a long time. But, I will never forget watching Brett Lindros retire at that age. It was something that stayed with me.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard. So first, he gets hit by LaRue in February 9th, comes back in March, seems to be okay,
Right.
and actually scores his first goal.
Yeah.
It's on March 7th, 1995, against the Hartford Whalers, everybody's now favorite displaced former franchise. It was a bit of a fluke
Best
goal.
logo, by the way. Best logo in sports history. I'm pretty sure.
It's still fantastic. I have a buddy of mine at work who is from Hartford, wears a Whalers hat every day.
Oh, yeah.
It's classic. He can never get rid of it because the new ones aren't going to be the same. But so he scores. Brett Lindros scores this goal. It's not the prettiest sniperish goal you would expect from a guy who was a 9th overall pick. He just sort of like throws the puck at the net as he's gliding behind it, and it goes in. I forget who the goalie even was, but hey, they all count, right? So.
Yeah.
Hard around the board. Sandlak trapped it, then he is met solidly. That thrown by Benoit Hogue. Maskey ties up his man. Chenault goes to the puck, but it's Lindros bringing it out 3-on-3 at center ice. Lindros put a move on McCrimmon. Drives in on it, unable to center it around Pronger. Then he goes to the back of the net, and he scored! Mick Makota slapping his stick on the ice. All right, Brett, he's saying his first, and it was a little unusual. He brought it all the way down, Jiggs. There's a happy camper. Maybe he ought to talk to Stan Fischler more often between periods. He was Stan's guest. Beautiful move here. Glenn Wesley went for the body, went the wrong way. And as he tried to clear it in front of the net, Pronger put his stick down. That let him get a hold of it. And Mick Makota saying, it's in, yes. Come on and get it. Get the puck.
That was it for his first season with the Islanders. He only had the 1 goal, 3 assists, 33 games, but he did have 100 penalty minutes.
Yeah.
Because he fought a ton of guys.
Yeah.
So even after the concussion, which is probably not the smartest thing in the world.
My dad works in B2B marketing. He came by my school for career day and said he was a big ROAS man. Then he told everyone how much he loved calculating his return on ad spend. My friends still laugh at me to this day.
Not everyone gets B2B, but with LinkedIn, you'll be able to reach people who do. Get a $100 credit on your next ad campaign. Go to linkedin.com/results to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/results. Terms and conditions apply. LinkedIn, the place to be, to be.
Summertime comes around. The Islanders obviously have an abjectly terrible season. They're in dead last. Pierre Turgeon has now been traded. Lorne Henning is let go, and a new coach named Mike Milbury is brought on. But that's not the only change to the Islanders that summer. They also introduce a brand new set of uniforms that have gone down in history. This is a whole thing. You were there at the front lines of this whole thing happening. Yeah. But my only question to ask, you've probably been asked about these uniforms a million times. My only question to you right now is, are you surprised at the renaissance that this jersey has had now with the younger generation of people that have taken to it? It's pretty amazing.
Yes. I'm very surprised by it. I have an Islander fan in my house. My oldest son is an Islander fan, and he's one of your listeners, probably.
That's right. Shout out Ian.
He loves it. In fact, I have like one of those fake or nouveau, what do you call them? Retro, not an original one, of course.
The reverse retro.
But the one that they gave out, in Brooklyn, we went to a game and they gave out fisherman jerseys, and that was, we wanted to go to a game, and we got the whole family together, and it was like 10 or 12 of us, we were calling cousins from Long Island to come, and we all got these fisherman jerseys, and I have a fisherman jersey hanging in my closet. I don't think I've ever worn it since that day. That's but no, it's look, the colors are cool, and the design of it was definitely cool, and I think it might have done well in those days as a third jersey, which teams didn't have in those days. Didn't have third jerseys. Much later, I think the Rangers came up with the Liberty jerseys, and third jerseys became a thing. But teams didn't have third jerseys in those days, and you remember I remember talking to the ownership group at the time, that the four guys, and they, the league had gone to them and told them that they were, must have been last in merchandise sales or something, and the league had told them that they needed to do something to kind of freshen up their merchandise sales. And so these guys came up with the idea of what about a uniform redesign. And I really, I took some art classes in college, right? So I have I have an artistic sort of eye. I mean, I can draw, and I understand. I took some design courses, and I understand the basic concepts of design and balance and contrast and all this kind of stuff. And the colors are cool, and I don't have a problem with the design. I think my biggest problem with the jersey was the fisherman himself, because it looked like the Gorton's fisherman. It looked like Stan Fischler, and it looked really generic. You had a guy in a fisherman outfit with a beard holding the hockey stick in front of a goal, and it was like, dude, that looks like the Syracuse Crunch logo. It's so generic. And the Islander logo with the NY with the hockey stick and the picture of the island, that's cool.
Yeah.
So my problem from day one was, and I asked these guys when I talked to them about it, why not, have the Islander logo with the NY with the stick and the island, and put that instead of the fisherman? And, the design team that they hired told them that, it was, the whole thing just needed to be changed, and they needed to move away from the NY. I really think, had they done with the waves and the teal and all that kind of stuff, but kept the old logo, the original logo, I think it would have been better received.
Which is exactly what they did. And I was just saying this on another episode of Weird Islanders that may or may not come out before this one. I have no idea that that's the only time I've ever recall any team changing their jersey and then 2 months later being like, okay, we're going to change it back. We're going to change it back. That's when we found out that the league had rules for you couldn't change your jersey within 2 years of changing it already. And they had to kind of create this idea, this third jersey, which would be with the original logo on it, with the waves on it, that they would wear as a third jersey the second year. And then they would transition that to the main jersey. And then they would go back to sort of the classic jersey. So we found out all these rules basically because they went to the fishermen, and I've written about it. And, the funny thing is that the idea behind it, I thought was good. They wanted to pay tribute to the Baymen, to the guys who work out east on the island. And that's great. That's terrific. But there's civic pride, and then there's sports pride. And at that point, the Islanders logo had all the pride you could possibly want. Yeah, the team had stunk at that point, but there was a lot of pride still in that jersey and that logo based on what the Dynasty guys had done. And they were trying to get away from that. But the other thing is, you're telling me that all of the people that it took to make this logo never, ever saw a box of Gorton's fish sticks in a supermarket freezer cabinet? Not a single one of them had ever seen a box of fish sticks before. Nobody could be like, hey, wait a minute, I've seen that guy.
The commercials were on television. You didn't need to see it in your supermarket. You would see it on your television.
It's crazy.
It was no, I remember talking to these guys, and they were like, look, they got sold a bill of goods, basically. Again, my own feeling is the colors were cool. The design I was okay with. And I think
teal was very big in the 90s.
Teal was big. The teal was big at that time. And, and the Sharks had come in, and they were teal and all that kind of stuff. So it was fine. All of that was fine. The orange was sort of like that creamsicle orange, like the old Tampa Bay Buccaneers. All of that was fine. And, but the art, whatever art ad agency or whatever, whoever designed it, convinced them that, no, you get, that you couldn't put the old logo on the New Jersey. It all went together, and you had to have this fisherman, and, whatever. I mean, but as you say, that thing is fondly looked back on fondly now by people that didn't live through the era, and, just didn't have any sort of idea of how the vitriol for it was.
Yeah. Yeah, seriously, it is funny that we've become that far removed from it because it was pretty bad back then. Speaking of vitriol, again, Mike Milbury is the man in charge now, and we
Yeah.
all know that he is also a man who could sling some vitriol. This is not an era that we talk about a lot because he's not the GM yet; he's just a coach.
He's just a coach. Yeah,
he's just a coach at this point. So I mean, just real quick, like your recollection of Mike Milbury, head coach. We listen, this is going to be like episode 50 something of this show, and almost every one of them ends up, the two people we end up talking about the most are Mike Milbury and Rick DiPietro, because most roads somehow go through them. So we talked about Mike ad nauseum here, but we don't really talk about him as like early Islanders coach. And I mean, again, you were there. Like, what were your impressions of him just coming in as a coach with a really stern reputation? I mean, he had won with the Bruins. Like, he was a real big get at the time for the Islanders.
Very much so. Very much so. And you know, it was good. I mean, you know, we understood that the team wasn't very good at that point. We understood, you know, that the payroll was low, and certainly once they, you know, started trading people and you know, getting away from that 93 team, the further away they got from that, we understood where we were going. I mean, at a certain point, once Turgeon was gone, you know, it was like, what are we doing here? You know, I mean, so I don't, you know, I initially I liked Milbury just fine, but you know, I don't think it's fair really even to look at, and I now I look back on it, that whole era, and I look back and all the stuff, and yeah, they were bad and they were bad and they were bad, but like I just don't think you can fairly assess or evaluate anything that anybody did just because they were such a, you know, they just couldn't spend, you know, I mean, they couldn't get players. They couldn't compete with some of the other teams. And this, again, this is pre, you know, salary cap, right? So, you know, and then we thought, of course, when they got, you know, this owner from Texas named John Spano, we're like, oh, this is gonna solve everything. And, you know, and we all know how that turned out.
Yeah, no, definitely did not turn out that way. It turns out, yeah, even Mike Milbury probably had more money than John Spano
I
did.
mean, it was, it was just a weird, you know, weird time, as you're obviously, you know.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Oh, trust me. I know better than I would like to know, to be honest with you. So we come into the 1995-96 season. This is a team despite the new coach, still very much a team in turmoil. The uniforms don't help, but the Mueller saga is still going on. Wendell Clark is here now. We did an episode on him as well. And Brett Lindros is back. He's part of the team. I guess his, you know, concussion symptoms had subsided at that point. Again, he only finished this season, the preseason, his first season, or first half season, I should say, with just the one goal. And I think, you know, expectations were a lot higher for him. But this is where we get to the
48 game season, though. So, you know, it's not like he went 80 games and scored one goal. 48 game season, he probably missed, I don't remember. He probably played like, what did he play, like 45 games or something?
33 games, yeah.
All right.
Because he missed a lot.
Right, he missed 15 games. So, yeah, I mean, one goal in 33 games, it's not great, but it's not 1 in 80.
Yeah. We around here call that the Nino Niederreiter, who scored one goal in, I think it was 50
Remember, you know, as I tell you, you know, Brendan Shanahan, look him up.
Right.
I think his rookie year, he had 1 goal or 3 goals or something like that, and he played the full season. You know, he was you know, Shanahan was an 18-year-old. Lindros was a 19-year-old, I think. So we were all willing to write off all of that stuff. 1 goal in 33 games for a 19-year-old, and he fought all the time and played on the fourth line. You know, it was not a shocker. You know, and I think we were thinking, well, let's see, you know, now that maybe he's got a little bit of respect around the league, maybe he'll fight less and score more, and, you know.
Yeah, didn't, unfortunately, like we've been saying this whole time, didn't really work out that way. But yeah, that's true. That's a good point though. He's still only 19 at this point. But it's in November of 95 that 2 things happen, and they're both concussions. One, and they're both very close to one another. One was on November 16th in a game against the LA Kings. And then the final one was on November 24th. So about a week or so later.
Right.
in a collision with Jason Daw of Buffalo. And this is what you were just talking about before.
Yeah.
Actually wasn't a fight. It was just a check.
A fight. Right. Now that you mention it, yes, that's true.
Yeah.
And by the way, if I recall, Brett Lindros was bigger than Jason Daw.
Oh yeah,
a lot bigger. So it was so that's where the alarm bells are like, whoa, what is going on here? But clearly, he hadn't fully recovered from the one a week before. So that's what it was.
Definitely. And again, as we mentioned before, like God only knows how many concussions and injuries and head injuries he had in junior. And so this was, again, late November 1995. He starts seeing a bunch of doctors. I have an article here from the Daily News. I'm assuming you wrote it, but basically it said that he had kind of decided to retire at that point, like early December of 95. But it's not until May of 96 when he finally announces that he has retired. And at that point, he had turned 20 on December 2nd of 1995. And so basically around his 20th birthday, he decided to retire, except he just didn't announce it until a while later. I mean, did you think that third concussion was going to be it for him? Did you think that he was going to come back?
No, of course not. But obviously we knew a lot less about concussions then than we do now. As I told you, and I saw what Filipino did, and I thought of Lindros immediately. But no, we definitely didn't expect. I mean, again, we still didn't know that he had all these concussions in junior hockey. I mean, what we knew was he fought a lot. He had a couple concussions, and the two that you're talking about were so close together that we were like, well, that's a problem. Obviously, let's just get him situated and set up, and then he'll be fine next year. No, the retirement came as a shock to me anyway, if not to everybody. He was such a young guy. He was 20 years old. It was it was crazy.
Yeah. You don't expect, a 20-year-old sort of in the prime of his life to retire. But May 1st, 1996, he finally announces his retirement. And this was a big deal.
Concussions in pro sports and their after effects. It's become a real concern and has already taken quite a toll. NFL players like Al Toon, Merrill Hodge, and Chris Miller have all had to get out of the game. Wednesday, a young man got out of hockey in time. Brett Lindros of the Islanders retires at age 20 for fear of another concussion.
What's every kid's dream to play in the NHL, and my dream's basically been shattered. I really don't like to think about it. I hate to think about it, and talking about it is difficult. But I guess, on the broader scale of life, I realize that others have bigger problems.
Brett Lindros, only 20 years old, and he is going to be taken care of financially. Disability insurance will kick in and pay most of the remaining money on his 3-year contract. At this point, he hasn't said what career he would like to pursue now that his playing days are over.
The last name is kind of, I guess, both a blessing and a curse. And this is where, when the brother of one of the league's biggest stars retires at 20 after all these concussions, it makes national news. And, people went out there, and he became a bit of a poster boy for not only concussions, but first round busts, for lack of a better term, for, brothers who maybe aren't, don't reach the heights of their older brothers or other brothers' success. And, unfortunately, again, kind of saddled with this label of, another Islanders bust. Finishes with just 51 games played, 2 goals, 5 assists, 7 points, 147 penalty minutes, but not nearly, the long enough career that you would have expected from a guy drafted at 9th overall.
Well, the other thing too, that came up at that time was that Eric Lindros had concussions,
right?
And so when Brett retired at age 20, I think immediately a lot of people sort of looked to Eric and was like, well, this guy's had some concussions too. Like, does it run in the family? Are they predisposed genetically to get concussions? Is Eric going to have an issue? Is he going to have to retire? So that was, the significance of Brett Lindros retiring was, a 20-year-old kid is retiring, but also, people were wondering about, what was going to happen with Eric. Obviously, Eric went on to play a lot more years. And, and it worked out well for him. But at the time, in the moment, yeah, that was a thing that people were worried about as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you mentioned him early, but Carl Lindros was Eric and Brett's father. And Carl would lead a sort of a big push against the Flyers when Eric was eventually traded to the Rangers. I think I don't have it right in front of me.
By the
But
way, how do you, if you're the Flyers, trade your biggest star to the Rangers? I don't even know.
I don't know. Listen, this sort of stuff happens to the Rangers all the time. Yager's got to get traded. Oh, he goes to the Rangers. Oh, Rick Nash has got to get traded. Oh, he goes to the Rangers. Oh, Marty St. Louis got to get traded. He goes to the Rangers. So, Artemi Panarin is going to sign somewhere. He signs at the Rangers. So, to me, I'm just used to it. But I think Eric might have been. Well, he wasn't the first because there are other people who've had. But that was an insane thing. But the funny thing is that Carl still kept up fighting with the Flyers because he said that they hadn't diagnosed his son properly and stuff. So did you have, I know we're getting kind of towards the end here, but Carl also, I shouldn't he got into a bit of a dispute with the Islanders, but eventually they settled because there was still that contract to be paid out. And eventually they did settle on a number and Brett did eventually get his money and Carl was kind of front and center there. Did you have a lot of dealings with Carl at the time? He's a little bit like the sort of prototypical hockey dad. He was also their agent or manager or whatever at the time. And
yeah, it was a weird thing. I probably had some contact with him, but not a lot. I mean,
yeah,
I don't think I had a lot of contact with him. But yeah, no, I reached out to him, and I'm sure we exchanged messages, or I talked on the phone maybe once. In those days, we weren't texting, like we do now. But no, I had some contact, but it would be minimal.
Yeah. Which is probably for the best because
he was a guy that was, as you say, front and center in a lot of this and manipulated this a lot, and so he was he was a celebrity in his own right. So I mean, it was like I almost didn't even want to deal with the guy, to be honest.
I can imagine. I'm sure Bob Clark has had. Wish he had never had to deal with Carl Lindros either. But if you're not familiar with that, go back and read those because it got pretty nasty.
Yeah,
again, even well after Eric was already gone. He, even when he was playing with the Leafs in Dallas, if there's ever going to be a weird Leafs or weird Stars podcast, Lindros is definitely going to get an episode of those two. But so Brett retires again at 20. It's very, very unfortunate. Your colleague or again, former Newsday writer Jim Smith had written an article at the Hockey News about this sort of shattered dream of Lindros, and it's pretty affecting. You should take a look at it. I have the link in there, and it's pretty sad. And going back through all of this, I'm just reminded at just how much like excitement and promise there was with this guy. And I think Islanders fans really wanted this to work. I think they wanted, nobody expected him to be Eric, like we said, but like they wanted a guy to come in and be a star. And if he was going to fight and score a little bit, that's what we love. I mean, Bob Nystrom is Mr. Islander because he could fight and he could score.
if he was going to be a guy who could play on your third line, let's say, and get you 15 goals and 175 penalty minutes in a season, that would have been just fine. It would have been just fine. And, that's not typically a guy that, you're drafting number 9 overall, but I think the Islanders would have been happy with that.
Sure.
You got a guy who's getting you 15 goals and 150 or 200 penalty minutes, and standing up for teammates and stuff, because he would do that. And have a last name that that you could market. That would have been great. It just didn't happen.
Did not work out. However, that would not be the last that hockey fans would see of Brett Lindros, because after he retired, he hosted this syndicated show called Be a Player, which was the NHLPA's show. You mentioned right off the top, and I'm glad you did, that he was a charismatic guy. He was very well spoken. Did you see this being a potential career for him in broadcasting? Obviously not at 20.
Broadcasting, yes, maybe not at 20 though. I mean, and I was actually happy to see him do it and kind of still be around the game in some way for a time. I wish him the best. I mean, I never, I always liked him. He was a likable guy. Smart, funny. And the way his playing career ended was sad. So, it looked like, if he was going to go into TV and, and become a TV star, that would have been just fine for me.
Yeah. I kind of, that show did not last very long. It was there used to be the NBA one, Inside Stuff, that went on for a long time, and the Be a Player show didn't last for long, but it lasted long enough for Brett to at least get to interview his former Islanders teammates in their frat house that they kind of lived in at the same time, Brian McCabe and all those guys, which is a fun bit.
What's this? Do you know how to work this stuff or what?
I do. I got to show those guys how to work it.
You're the man around the house. You're the fix-it guy.
Pretty much everything. They never take the lint out of the dryer, so one day the place is probably gonna burn down.
Well, it's a good thing because Brian's he's got the fire, the smoke alarm. No. This doesn't even work. It doesn't have anything in there. What's going on there? Safety first is not
the old money pit. They saw us coming again. I haven't even noticed that. Thanks for pointing that out.
Yeah. Now, do you think the front office, the aisle, I mean, they got Brian Berard, Eric Fischel, Brian McCabe.
The Islanders die in fire because fire alarms don't hooked up.
We'll have to take care of that.
We'll have to take care of that. I think the landlord's going to be getting a call.
Again, yeah, good for him. Like, I'm kind of surprised he didn't keep up with that, but he went to the private sector. I think he's in real estate now, or stocks or something like that. But it's unfortunate. And again, he kind of became this avatar for this era of Islanders hockey, a very disjointed, unstable era. The concussions are incredibly sad, and it's a terrible thing to happen to anybody. But this was just unfortunately the way the Islanders were at the time. There was almost like a cursed franchise in a way.
But they did so. You can't absolve them. It's not just bad luck, right? Yeah. Because yes, the concussion thing is sad, but had they been scouting all along, they would have been aware of all the concussions he had playing junior hockey. And that might have been a guy you took in a later round and not ninth overall. As it happens, you wasted a first round draft pick there, and you traded a guy in Uwe Krupp, to get a guy that played 51 games. So it's not, that's a mistake that somebody made, or some people made. So you can regret, so it's not just, a lot of bad things to happen to the Islanders, but they've got to take responsibility, because in a lot of cases they another guy, Dean Chenoweth, you remember him?
Definitely.
David Chazowski was the guy that they took number 2 overall, because he had 89 goals for Kamloops one year. And, Dave Chazowski was a nice enough kid, but he certainly wasn't scoring 80 goals in the NHL. So, I mean, I don't think that they did a good enough job in scouting these kids at that time. So that's what I would, put that on them. Like, Brett Lindros, you could have taken a flyer on him in the 3rd or 4th round, but 9th overall is tough.
Yeah, definitely. And like you said before, I mean, they did have a lot of money issues, and I've said this before on this show and Islanders Anxiety, our flagship show. I was a Milbury apologist for a long time, because there was no ownership. There was nobody steering the ship, basically. Absolutely. And, but at the same time, this guy averaged a trade a month for his 10-year career as a general manager. And the thing that actually kind of made me rethink all that was, ironically, Darcy Regier, who worked with the Islanders at the time Milbury was hired, and kind of was pushed aside in favor of Milbury, who built the Sabres on similarly tight purse strings into a really, really good team for a really long time. Now it helps to have Dominic Hasek and Ryan Miller and a bunch of other really good goalies.
The Islanders drafted a guy named Roberto Luongo.
Yes, they did.
So they could have had him.
Yeah, exactly.
But then they got the number 1 pick overall, and they decided to draft DiPietro.
Yep. We have done an episode on Roberto Luongo as well.
So I mean, again, they've aided in their own misfortune.
Absolutely, 100%, and that's the case. And again, also very much the case here with Brett Lindros. Bad luck, but also biting off a little too much.
Because
for everybody,
at the end of the day, it should be, if you're running a hockey team, it should be about the hockey and not about the marketing. I mean, you can get somebody's younger brother, a big star's younger brother, even if you're not going to be that big a star. but he has to be a good player.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, especially if you're going to take him in the first round, like you just can't swing it. You know, you're not going to hit on all of these, but you can't miss that badly.
Yeah, definitely. And the Islanders, unfortunately, have made a habit of that. Colin Stephenson, this has been so much fun. I hope you've had a really, really good time here. I'm going to put you on the spot. What is more fun, remembering Brett Lindros and the incredibly wild and woolly mid to late 90s Islanders, or doing podcasts with Andrew Gross after Islanders-Rangers games?
Oh, I have fun no matter what I'm doing. This is fun, and doing pods with Andrew is also very fun. I wish we would do more of it, but, unfortunately, I don't cover the Islanders. So.
No, I wish you would too. I love his podcast. I mean, it's required listening, to be honest with you, for all of us. And I love your guest appearances on there because you guys sound like you're having a good time.
Well,
and
that's what I do, man. I'm the good time guy. I just go on and we just laugh and have a good time.
Yeah. It's fun. Well, it's also unique because, like, he comes from the Islanders side, you come from the Rangers side. You're both obviously incredibly knowledgeable. You've been friends for a long time. The rapport is there, and there's no if it was an Islanders fan and a Rangers fan on the podcast, I don't know if I would want to listen to it because it would devolve into like trash talk and stupidity and weirdness. But like, because you guys are you both covered the league for a long time. You don't need to do all that stuff. And again, you're friends. It's very entertaining, and I love it when you're on there. And I love his podcast too. So I really appreciate those appearances.
No, well, thank you very much. I mean, I look forward to. We'll have another one actually. Well, this will not air before that, but as you and I speak, we're wrapping up the preseason, and actually, it's the night before the final preseason game between the Islanders and Rangers, and so I'll see Andrew. I'll tell him you said hello.
Thank you. I appreciate that. We gotta get him on anxiety one of these days. So
he'll be great.
Get him on there. Yeah, I think so too. Thank you very much. Everybody knows where to find you writing for Newsday. Is there anything? I'm gonna be honest with you. As a Rangers writer, I don't know how many
No.
following you on social media, so I won't do that.
But I do have one quick story talking about Islander fans following me on social media. You forget, I'm tweeting when I'm on Twitter or X or whatever. I'm posting for the Ranger fans that are following me, but Islander fans follow me too, and Devil fans follow me as well. So I made a little snarky comment, in the preseason game because the Devils went to Czechia and still had somehow had a team play the Rangers in the preseason, and basically it was a minor league team. And I made some snarky comment about the Utica Devils or something, and a lot of Devil fans weren't happy with me. So I apologize.
Oh man, but it's funny. Brendan Burke made a similar joke on the Islanders broadcast when they were playing the Devils too. So I mean, you weren't the only person thinking it because I remember checking in and seeing that too. But we're good friends with Arthur Staple, and he gets all that same stuff too. It seems like you guys can't win, unfortunately.
When you can't win. So you just laugh.
Yeah, you got to laugh with it, but I appreciate it. Again, this is an episode I've wanted to do for a very long time, so I really can't thank you enough for coming on. Again, shout out to your son, Ian, who's a listener and a fan, and I got to meet him at our live event last March, and he's a very brave man because he has an Islanders Oliver Wahlstrom jersey.
Yeah, well,
how many people have?
He's had it for a while. I mean, kind of, I don't know. We'll see. We'll see if he's going to have to freshen it up somehow.
Yeah. By the time this comes out, that might be a collector's item. We'll have to see. But thank you very much for coming on. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Becoming a member at patreon.com/IslandersAnxiety for ad-free episodes and bonus content. Join for free to get announcements and our weekly release calendar. Find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, Audible.com, iHeartRadio, YouTube Music, and wherever you get your podcasts. Please leave us a review where you can. Our theme song is Knuckles by Bjorn Falk. Listen to more of Bjorn's music at Bandcamp and on Spotify. Read Lighthouse Hockey every single day for most up-to-date Islanders news and discussion. Islanders Anxiety podcasts are part of the Fans First Sports Network. Shop VintageIceHockey.com. Try wines from the Pinot Project. Colin, I will give you the final word. Any last words on Brett Lindros, very, very brief New York Islander and NHL player?
Well, he was a brief time as an Islander, but he made a lasting impression in all those fights, and he was a good guy, still a good guy, and he's part of Islanders lore now. So I wish him all the best.
Me too. Well said. Thank you very much, and we'll be back in a couple weeks with another Weird Islander. Until then, keep the Islanders weird. We'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.